Hi, everyone. I'm Mad Hildebrandt, and this is the Get Mad Show. Today, our guest is Valerie Plame, who is running for U.S. Congress in New Mexico's 3rd District. You know her as the CIA agent who was outed by the Bush administration. Let's go. Well, welcome to the show, Valerie. We're really excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Mad. I am sitting in Patrick Smith Park besides the mighty Santa Fe River because I have no Wi-Fi at my house right now.
That's the way it is for so many of us, because we all have that broadband problem in New Mexico.
Indeed.
So what I'd like to do right off the bat here at the very beginning, the way I do on all of my shows, is give you a minute to introduce yourself to the public, not as a candidate, but just as who you are, so that they can kind of get to know a little bit more about you, who you're socially distancing with, those sorts of things.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So I am social distancing with my 20-year-old twins. They are both home from college. They are sophomores, and we are busily fighting over Wi-Fi bandwidth, which today apparently there's none. Also, my shelter dog Artemis, who's 13 and becoming rather arthritic. I think of myself as their mother, Samantha and Trevor's mother. I've been through a national political scandal, but what was important to me was I showed up for their school events and their sporting events and was there for them in that capacity. And I also come from a family of public service. My dad was an Air Force officer. My mother was a public school teacher, and my brother is a Vietnam Marine veteran, wounded, as he says, once Marine, always Marine. And because of that background, I suppose I really jumped at the opportunity to serve my country in the CIA. And I did that as a covert ops officer for some time. And I loved what I did, and it ended rather abruptly, but I found my way here to New Mexico, and this is my home now.
Yeah, that is, you have quite a background story, and we will get into that in a few minutes. But New Mexico does have a tendency to bring people in. It's, that land of enchantment really does have a tendency to do that.
Said, which is true, you either get it or you don't.
Right.
I've moved over 22 times as an adult, and this is my home. I can't imagine living anyplace else, and it's where I raised my kids, and it's gorgeous. I was just camping and hiking this weekend up in the mountains behind Mora. It was stunning.
Yeah, it is. This state just has so much wonderful wilderness if people are attracted to that.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that one of the reasons that your kids are home and so many people are impacted, they're sitting at home a lot, and that is the fact that we're in the middle of this pandemic, COVID-19. And can you just talk a little bit about how that is impacting not just you, but how you feel about the state, about whatever, just your thoughts on COVID-19?
Yeah, I mean, this word is overused, but it is the most apt, which is surreal. We are all finding ourselves in a circumstance that we never quite imagined. It sort of was the stuff of movies, and not good movies. So what it has done is, I think, most of all, ripped aside any pretense that things the way they were working for us, whether healthcare, our economy. And poor New Mexico is really feeling a double whammy in that not only do we have the economic devastation from the pandemic, but oil and gas prices have plummeted. Who knew futures could be in the negative? And so we are looking at a pretty devastating landscape. It's not just going to be weeks, it's going to be months and years to restore it and bring it back to where we are. And I think this is my sense. I mean, I in obviously can't be going around and knocking on doors and meeting people in real life like I had hoped to be. But I think the two things right now people care about most are the healthcare issues, the public health issue around this. And that speaks to when are we going to get testing, because that's the only way consumer confidence will begin to creep back to then help boost our economy. And then beyond that, longer term, what the heck do we do? We've got huge holes to fill in infrastructure and education. Our GRT, the gross receipts tax, on which we rely so heavily for our state's budget, has just, disappeared, completely disappeared. 39% of our budget relies on oil and gas, gone.
Yeah.
So we are going to need some uh, really good leadership to see us through this crisis, which I think we are just at the beginning stages of, even though, thank goodness, it does seem that bit by bit, uh, the curve is flattening.
Yeah, we look at this and we see that there are so many elements to all of this. And one of the things that I want to ask you about, and I know you mentioned that you come from a family of service, and I know that we've, before the show, we talked a little bit about just, some of the meaning of that, of just being a person who serves their country. And you are a person like I, being a veteran, I'm a veteran, you're a former CIA, that, that you have a background of service to your country, not just you, but also your family. And can you talk about what the sense of that means that's a little bit different than someone who has been raised either to be a politician or who is coming into politics because they're, from the politician side?
Thank you. What a nice question, because it's a quiet sacrifice. I think for Memorial Day was the only day that my mom would put a small American flag in our flower pot out front of our house, wherever we were. We moved a lot, of course, with my dad in the Air Force. And very, very few financial rewards, generally speaking, for government or public service, but you do it clear counterpolitical need for public uh, acknowledgement, because I knew what I was doing was really worthwhile. In fact, once in a while, I thought, that what I was doing might have ended up on the president's desk or senior U.S. senior policy advisors. And so there's a great deal of satisfaction in that. So what we have seen, I'm going to go back to the Reagan era, and many of us just really appreciated President Reagan's great sense of humor and self-deprecation. We all love that. But the fact was, many of his policies were quite painful. And I mark that point is when public service became something sort of as laughable, or you're a fool that you're not making money on Wall Street, because Reagan said, you got to laugh out of this line, but the scariest thing he's ever heard is the knock at the door and they say, I'm the government, I'm here to help you. And starting from that period, where on the right, public service really did, it was seen, government as in general was seen as intrusive and corrupt, and no surprise, our trust in government has fallen as a result, which is quite different from, there's something to be said about efficient government and good government, of course, but not all government is bad. And that's kind of where some of the uh, what passes for intellectual thought on the right goes. And I thoroughly disagree with that, because there is a place for good government in our lives. It can make people's lives better.
Right.
And I just read right before this, I think Paul Krugman's article today in the New York Times was something like, let's hear it for the safety net. Darn right, particularly here in New Mexico. You better believe in my drive up to Mora, which was absolutely stunningly beautiful, also has grinding poverty.
Oh, yeah.
And you see it. There are literally outhouses there. People just scraping by. And this was when times were flush, so to speak.
Right.
And
Right.
here we are in a period where it's going to be really tough.
Oh yeah, and we look at so much of what has happened, and with the idea of limiting and our government and cutting out programs and the just incredible hollowing out of the government that is happening now, which started, yes, you're under Reagan and has just but the speed with which it is happening now, which we see, ending up in the problems that we're talking about today, that, with COVID-19 and with the loss of a safety net and the possible loss of a post office and these sorts of things.
I
Um,
know. I know.
so it is an incredible thing, and one that we need to see, uh, from our side, is going to have to go and handle that. Um, One of the things that I want to ask you about, because you're basing a lot of this, um, your experience, that you're going to be bringing enabled in, which is going to enable you to handle a lot of these things, is that you were a CIA operations officer, and that lends you a certain amount of experience that is, needed in Congress. And we're seeing that with people like Abigail Spanberger, who comes from a very similar
Rob.
background.
Yeah.
So can you talk about that and how that is going to be a helpful thing for you?
Yes, thank you. I look forward because I'm running for office, I'm running for this, and I want to put my leadership experience, my crisis management experience to good use. I went through this incredibly life searing betrayal by my own government for partisan politics. And I know what it's like to be betrayed and be knocked down and then get back up and keep fighting. My husband and I were absolutely smeared. We were called traitors and liars and all sorts of really, really horrible things. But I know what that feels like and what it's like to stand up and push back. And I would have to say my time in the CIA, my hair's looking so lovely in this wind. My time in the CIA in many ways prepared me for this, and here's how specifically I think so. I spent many years working with people from different cultures, different backgrounds, sometimes didn't speak the same language, sitting around the same table. And my job was to say, we have a common mission, which is X, whatever, and this is how we're going to move toward it. I have I feel very comfortable working and dealing with people and listening to people from different backgrounds and cultures. And so here I am, find myself in New Mexico, which we pride ourselves on our diversity and our rich cultures here. And I can throw myself into that knowing that I've had a lot of experience in the past getting really good results. I am running to fight for and represent everyone in New Mexico. And maybe it's because I've lived and traveled and worked all over the world. I don't have any sort of tunnel vision about, well, we've always done it like that, so let's do it let's continue doing it this way. I'm really open, and I try to be a very good listener. When I had some pretty senior positions ultimately when I finally left the CIA, and you only get to do that when you have proven good judgment, that you share the credit, and that you provide that leadership. Here's where we gonna want to go. And to me, leadership is not just ordering people around what to do, but you show them what you want done. And the least task should not be above a leader to say, I'll take care of it. It needs to be done. I'm going to go do it. So I try to bring all of that experience, all of that background, all of my life's adventures to this point, which is running for this seat to represent my community and to serve them and serve my country again.
Yeah, and that's a good point, that thought that, sometimes there is a tunnel vision, that people who have lived in a certain spot and haven't experienced outside of that, that that you can see things that other people don't really see. And that's my experience as well, because, coming from a military family, I was, in the military, and my husband was in the military, and you see all these different ways of doing things, and you see the best in those things and the worst, and then you want to bring those. And so I totally, yeah, it's a really great point of view. You go ahead.
I feel like I was just going to add to that I feel I could literally be dropped into any place on this globe and figure it out pretty soon and make friends,
Yeah.
because I have that. I think the best thing that served me as being a successful ops officer, frankly, was genuine curiosity. I really care that everyone's got a story. You just have to ask about it.
Yeah, that's so very true. Um, I want to ask you, you mentioned a second ago, or a few moments ago, um, about being outed by the Bush administration. And
Yeah.
we're hearing that term again, that outing that this administration is using, trying to make some sort of similarity between what's happening with Mike Flynn and what happened to you. And I know that's something that I'd like you to just take a minute and talk about the difference. And I know you're not running for president and you're not doing all that, but talk about the difference between what's happening.
A couple things. I think there's a great term for what we see from this administration, and that would be gaslighting. Look it up. It's a great term for what we're seeing. It's sort of like the colloquial way of saying is, who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? And so what we have with Michael Flynn, I don't want to get in too deep in the weeds but for the administration to say that somehow he was outed because he was what's called unmasked is totally completely ridiculous. This happens all the time. Senior US policymakers read classified intelligence reports, and sometimes for them to really make sense of the context of it, they need to call up, and there's a whole protocol. It's not like they lift up a piece of tape. You have to go through a request process and say, I need this name to fully understand this intelligence. And then if it is determined that that is the case, then they get the name, and that's what happened. The list of Mike Flynn's truly egregious acts against this country is long, and I could have seen if the prosecutors said, "Oh, something like exculpatory evidence has come to light. We need to knock off this charge," because this. No, he, you don't just drop all the charges or attempt to have them dropped. And let's not forget he pleaded guilty twice to charges. So it's just yet another. This is the most recent example of the complete disregard that this president holds for the rule of law in this country, and that must end.
Yes, and we see that it begins with making sure that we have a good, strong member of the House from your district, and that the House and the Senate, which the Senate, as we know, is out of control. But those are the places to start, and that's why it's so important to have people sitting in that seat, the seat that you're going for, that understand not just the things that they want, and that we all want, but to understand some of the things that are going on and how to counter those. And certainly in this area, that it's your expertise is perfect for this. Right.
And that extends, let me just briefly add, national security. My background's in nukes, but it goes beyond that, which I also into cyber operations, where we have foreign interference in our voting, voter suppression. These are all things that, in fact, and as well as the existential threat of climate change, which we in the Southwest know about and feel and understand every single day. But all of these things do fall under the rubric of national security. And that's where I think my natural advantage is of all the candidates in this race.
Yeah. Yeah, and certainly in that arena, I don't think anybody else can touch you. That's right. So I know we've talked a little bit about it here and there, but I know when you're talking about the reasons that you want to serve there in your district, can you expand a little bit on that as far as some of the things that you're wanting to make a change, and some of the things that are causing you, propelling you forward into wanting to take this seat and to hold this for us?
Sure thing. Everywhere I go, or when I did go around this huge district, is it at home now on Zoom, but I heard the same thing over and over in every community from every voter. And there were three things that stick in my mind. They are access to quality education. This state has lagged behind for far too long. And we were just on the verge of really investing and really moving the needle after this last legislative session. Second one is, obviously, as we talked about earlier, restore and rebuild our economy. Again, the governor really made some great initiatives to begin to diversify our economy. We're going to have to redouble our efforts, particularly with oil and gas prices, and perhaps this is a sign from on high that we really need to refocus our efforts as well on green and renewable energies. And then finally, protecting our environment. Uh, my own love of New Mexico and all the hiking and camping I've been doing, especially during this time of COVID, um, that is repeated back to me everywhere I go. Water, 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 our air, our land, our soil, protecting I was at Chaco Canyon, I think a year or two ago, and the thought of seeing that desecrated with drilling rigs makes I'm really proud of the caucus that New Mexico has, that has really tried very hard to push back against that. But those are the three areas, education, economy, and environment, that I would throw myself into with with heart and soul and grit, as well as all the national security interests that we just discussed.
Right, and all of those are really key, and I know that are really important to, certainly to my viewers, but also definitely to other people that are actually your voting public in your district, and I'm sure that they will appreciate hearing those things from you. Um, we're at the very end. We made it. So I would like to give you that 1 minute that I reserve at the end for the candidates to actually give a shorter version of your stump speech, something that tells exactly why these constituents should be voting for you, and make sure also to provide your website.
Okay. So I'm Valerie Plame. I'm running for Congress because I truly believe we need a fighter in Washington to stand up for all New Mexicans. As I've traveled far and wide over this district when that was still possible, the things I heard over and over from from voters was access to quality education, rebuilding and restoring our economy, and protecting our environment. And those are things that I pledge to do as your next Congresswoman. COVID has hit our community so hard, and I want to be able to be a champion for free, robust, widespread testing, because that will be the first step in restoring consumer confidence to rebuild our economy on that road. I come from a family of public service, and I want to continue that. I got into this race because I wanted the opportunity and the honor to serve my community and serve my country again. The voters will have many choices on June 2nd if they haven't filled out their absentee ballot already. And my advantage is that I have that national security background, I have that experience, and I have that crisis management leadership skills, although that whole skill set will be needed and then some in the months and years to come. So this has been a delight, Mad, to be on. This has been fun, and I've enjoyed it. And I hope that if any of your listeners or viewers are interested in the campaign, they can find out more about me on ValeriePlameForCongress.com. That's the same name for my Facebook page. And if anyone would be interested in volunteering, of course, we're not doing door knocking, but I've got a little army of volunteers doing a lot of phone banking. So would love to hear from you as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. It's been a real pleasure spending this little bit of time with you, and for you to take that little bit of time for us.
In the park. I'm outside.
Yes, yes. And thank all of you out there for stopping by and watching this interview. And I urge you, as I do on all of these interviews, to go to Valerie Plame's website and learn more about her, and then check out all of her competition, all the other candidates that are running, and make sure that you are an informed voter who can make an informed choice. Make sure you vote in the primary, because that's when you are selecting who you want to represent you on the general election ballot. And then make sure you go and vote there as well. It just, your vote is so important, and your education is so important.
Absolutely.
Yes, it is. And make sure you also go down there and click the subscribe button so that you don't miss any of these interviews or important discussions with people in the know. And thank you everybody for joining us, and we will see you next time.